So unlike the last videos, I have remembered to record before I started. So now we're starting from the beginning to create the medicine ball rack. And I've created a cube here that I'm going to use to measure the scale and start from there. So I've imported the reference image and I'm scaling it up roughly to the same size, but I'm going to be modeling, so having the white background there is going to be pretty annoying. So I removed it, and this is something I do often-ish when I'm modeling. It helps me to focus on what I'm doing a lot easier. So with that said, I load up some of the other reference and get started. So, the base is pretty straightforward. There's a bunch of cubes, cuboids, etc. And I actually spent the first hour of the modeling of the rack on the base. Not sure what I was doing that it took me that long, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it's not really that long because I modeled it properly. So trying to respect the time it takes to do something is also another part of creating a large environment, or even a medium environment for that matter. So as you can see here, I got the shape I needed and then I mirrored it, I chopped it off, and then I mirrored it again, and basically just tweaking half of it so that when I'm done, I can just edit the other half. It also helps to work in symmetry for stuff like this. So here I'm using that technique I used before where I copy the shape and then I delete what I don't want and move from there. It really helps me to keep the new shape, to touch the old one, so I don't have to create a cube and put it into place. It really saves a lot of time. Okay, so what do we have here? Just putting in some edge loops, cleaning up the corners, testing the subdivision surface to see how it smooths. Do I like it? Do I hate it? And this is pretty straightforward box modeling. I'm not gonna lie. It's nothing spectacular or amazing about what I'm doing here. If anything, it could be a little more optimized actually. But again, as I said earlier, optimization can come a bit after. So for this bottom base plate, I was starting to get a little frustrated. It wasn't coming out the way I wanted at the time. So I spent a bit more time making sure the geo was cleaner and the bevel was a bit more optimized and ready for me to bevel the other edges, the outer edges, as you can see here. So it doesn't hurt to do this in the early because you don't want to be doing this super late into the process. That would be pretty annoying. So as you can see here, I deleted it, the faces that I didn't like, and then I bridged them back together and started stitching them and cleaning them up how I actually wanted to see it. Now I'm going on to the weld point. So as you can see, once again, I copied the weld point at the bottom of the barbell rack, and then I shaped it, cut it in half because I know I'm going to mirror it when I'm done, and I started tweaking it to fit what I was using. So there, I mirrored it and it's done already because most of the work was done by my past self, so to speak. You can see here another use of copying and pasting. So I copied the base plate, moved it up and chopped it because I'm going to use this for that what would you call that, bracket, I guess, that is at the base of the shape, which is holding the medicine balls together. So I don't have to redo all those bevels. I did them just now. So I just copy and reuse. So in doing that, I actually used the top part of the shape because it's already beveled and just extruded it down to the middle, and it created that curve. So it was low poly, but thinking ahead, I knew I was going to subdivide it later, but that helped me to create that curve a lot easier without even having to bevel it again. So reusing what you've done already really saves you a whole bunch of time. So you can see me mirroring it over and just testing to see how it works on both sides. Simple tweaks, just tweaking to get the shape that I want. And finally, we are able to move up the medicine ball rack and create the brackets that hold the medicine balls. So you can see here, I'm starting with a curve because that makes the most sense to create that curved bottom shape that spreads out kind of like a parabola or parabola, not sure how you pronounce it. So I'm gonna actually use that for the profile for the extrude. So I'm gonna use NURBS, created a circle, and then we're gonna extrude that using that as a profile. There's a much faster way to do that now, which is using the sweep NURBS option in the mesh menu. Sorry, in the create menu, but I did it the old school way. So it is what it is. And now I'm going to convert it to a polygon, as you can see, using convert NURBS to polygon, tweaking some settings, getting the amount of detail I want. So I'm gonna select the outer edges, the border edges of the cap. Then I'm gonna extrude and maybe do another inner extrude and start creating the caps for these handles, or brackets as it were. So I'm gonna create enough detail in the rings of the cap so that I can then decide to soft select it, as you can see, and give it that bulge that is gonna make it look a bit softer on the tip. So with that, I'll go back to the top of the bracket, well, the back of the bracket, I guess, and start to refine this curve. I did think it was a bit lower poly than I had planned. So here I'm tweaking it, and then I just decide, you know what, I'm gonna bevel it and add a bunch more detail to make it smoother. I just conform those triangles and merge them into the middle so that it reduces the polygons, the polygon footprint, and I'm back to the caps. So you can see here, I selected that edge to separate it. I detached the components so that I can have the caps as a separate mesh to the bracket handle, and I can apply materials to it a lot easier that way. So what we're doing next is duplicating them and looking at the reference to make sure they're the right size, the right length, and the right angle as they go up the rack. And now we're headed back to the base. So we left that for a while, but now we're back and we're gonna be beveling the edges and starting to add that detail to match the quality level of the other areas. So you're gonna see me go through a few different beveling attempts here. And it's because I was trying to figure out the correct bevel size to match the other areas of the base, and also the correct way to do it, which I don't recommend. There's no correct way to do something when it comes to art, at least. There's good ways and inefficient ways. So I've tested a material on it. I've tested some stuff, then I undo it yet again, and I'm trying to get the bevel just right. So sometimes it might take you, a couple attempts to get what you want. So I'm just letting you know, like, that's fine. So now we're gonna do the cap, and simple select, simple extrude, and then I pushed back the inner edge on both sides, and then I disconnected it. So similar to what I did from the caps at the top. Now I can just double click those faces and I can apply the materials a lot easier, which is obviously going to be important later. And it also helps with UVs later when they're detached like that. And you can see I always detach it in an area that the player won't be able to see, or the viewer won't be able to see. And I think I'm pretty happy with the job I did here. So I'm just gonna mirror it on both sides and then apply the materials, and yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. So here I'm just duplicating the thing that connects the brackets, the weld point, I guess, and then we're going to move on to the top, the cap at the top there, And I'm not sure if you notice, but there's a pattern here, right? So I'm gonna find the area that has a different material. I'm gonna go through a few iterations on what I think I should be doing, and then I'm going to, if it's a cap as this is, take the edge, extrude it inside where you can't see it, and then detach. And with that, I'll be able to apply a separate material a lot easier, UV a lot easier, and the viewer or the player is none the wiser. So I do like that workflow. I use it quite a lot, and it really helps simplify something that might have otherwise been a bit too complicated. So I'm just refining it to make sure it's giving me the look that I want. And as you can see, I redid it again. So don't be afraid, like it's software, like it's not gonna hurt you physically. So just redo something. If you really need to redo it, just do it. Sometimes it's faster to redo something than to keep bashing your head at it trying to do it perfectly. So that's something I learned along this entire process of creating this environment. So now that I have the edges I want, I just added some loops and made sure I cleaned up the topology at the top, and it's onto the ball. So, you know, the ball is a ball, and that's pretty simple. So I have the reference on the left and the reference in Maya, and I'm looking at the pattern. Honestly, this isn't necessarily critical, because the texture will determine that, or maybe at the time I was thinking I might model in the detail. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I want to texture it. So I'm just chopping it in half down the center and putting the UVs there. And yeah, from that point on, since the reference is to scale, I can take the sphere and scale it to the size of the reference. I can trust the reference basically to be correct, is what I'm saying. And that's only because I set it up early in the beginning to be to scale. So this helps a lot. There I'm matching the UVs so that when I create the texture with the different numbers on it, it all makes sense, and I can just swap out the textures and it will still fit the object. So I think we're pretty much done with modeling, which is great. And I think we did a pretty good job. So it's good enough to go over to Unreal. So we're just going to export that and bring it into the scene. So here we are in Unreal. We're going to go to where the medicine ball is. Just doing a little cleanup first, but then we're going to go to the medicine ball area and import the rack that we just did. And funny enough, I forgot to import the balls as well. So I'll do that in a second, but I'm just setting up the rack. I'm going to look at it in the scene, apply the materials. And as you can see, it's kind of comically smaller again. So clearly I went a bit too large, but that's fine. So since I remembered to import the balls now, I'm just exporting the 3 different sizes, and those are ready. So now I'm importing them into Unreal, and I'm gonna line them up on the rack and see, okay, what do we have here? Like, how do they fit? How do they work? The good thing about this is that I've created 3 different sizes. Now, one could say, why didn't you just create one ball and then just scale it to the size you need in Unreal? And yes, I could have done that. Like, I'm not saying you can't do that. But the good thing about this is there's no guesswork. I don't have to think about what size to scale them. I just bring in the small ball for the top, large ball for the bottom. Pretty simple. And if you can afford the extra work, then I would recommend simplifying stuff like that. So as you can see, I'm just lining it up best I can to the edge, so it doesn't look like it's clipping or crashing through the other side. And yeah, so I'm pretty happy with this. I'm gonna apply the basic rubber material and then start to look at some camera angles in a moment, because you know, as soon as you bring in the finished model, you gotta see how it works in the scene. So I'm organizing the scene a little bit before I do that, so I know which areas are which, and then I'm testing it in the scene. So here we are again. We have to adjust this to match the previous camera. There I was moving the barbell rack, but I realized the barbell rack is in place already, so I actually have to move the medicine ball to match that location. And now I'm testing some lighting, just seeing what works. Doesn't have to be perfect, I just need like kind of a rough idea of the shot. So I think I'm trying out some stuff, looking at the other angles, kind of happy with what I have, but still checking out the model in the scene. So we're gonna go next back to Maya and start UVing the entire medicine ball rack. So this process is, you know, to each their own. I like to cut seams where the viewer or the player won't see the seam. It's not always possible, but wherever you can, you should place your seams there. So obviously for this, I cut the underside of the base, so you can see that, so the player won't be able to see it. So this, you know, box UVing any shape that is box shaped is some of the easiest UVs you can probably do. And I'm just checking here for holes. I'm using the cleanup tool in Maya to check for things that might cause me issues. And when that happens in Maya, if you're using Maya, sometimes the easiest thing to do for UVs is to just redo the mapping. So that's what I did. I just set a different set of mapping on it to reset the UVs, I guess. And that get rid of some of the errors sometimes. Yes, you do have to cut your seams in again, but it is much faster, and then you know for sure there's no errors because you remapped the UVs. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm gonna speed up this UV section a little bit, only because it does get a bit monotonous, and you know, different people have different methods of UVs, so of UVing, sorry. And this is mine. So this process is what I kind of do for the whole thing. I'm not gonna skip it, but I will speed it up a little bit more. So here I am cutting into the caps. These are the caps at the bottom of the base, and I'm gonna be straightening out because it's box, it's more cuboid. I'm gonna be straightening out those UVs. You don't have to straighten every single object UVs in your scene, okay? Like, it's not necessary, but for mechanical objects, I find it does help the texture read so much better when they're straightened in the areas that are straight, of course. So for that there, once you UV wand, I just transfer the attributes for the brackets because they're the same topology, and that saved me a lot of time. And that's what I do quite often. I UV one, and then I make sure it's good, finish what I want, and then I transfer attributes, UV sets, and then delete history. Works beautifully almost every time. So I'm pretty happy with the overall straightened UVs. And now I'm gonna go to get those weld points in between the parts of the base. So I'm doing the thing I did before, duplicating the base and then deleting what I don't want. And I'm left with these intersections. So now I can take these intersections, because they're in the areas that I want, and just extrude them. Might take some tweaking, but I can extrude these intersections and create the weld points that I truly desire. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm creating the weld points, tweaking, checking some of the, like making sure the mesh isn't too thin or too thick, I guess, and making sure it looks right. Again, I'm not trying to make it perfect, but I do want the thickness to be to be sensible, I guess. So there I'm just applying the material, seeing how it looks. Does it look correct? Does it look in place? And honestly, I think this is good enough for me. So just making some very minor tweaks just to give each one a little bit of a different variation, or smoothing the edge so it doesn't look so inorganic. But I'll probably come back to that later if I'm being honest. So as you can see, I've checked the reference to make sure. And yeah, so now I'm moving on to that. There's like I don't know if to call it a bracket, but there are 2 poles. So I actually have mine as 1 pole, but they're actually 2 poles that stack on top of each other. So I'm going in now to make that cut and to make that whole, to make them into 2 separate pieces. And again, I've done this before. Make a cut, scale it in, disconnect the object. And I'm just trying to make sure it looks like it fits into it, because they're supposed to be 2 separate objects stacked and locked in or something like that. So I'm happy with that for now. And I'm moving on to the UVs. But yeah, I'll probably come back to that and see if I can make that look a little better. But yeah, same thing, box modeling, straighting UVs. I'm going to the weld points now. Similar thing, I might cut them in a corner, cut the seam and then straighten them so they're just wrap around. But other than that, the UVs are pretty much good. And you can see there, I wasn't satisfied, so I went back in and tweaked it a little bit, re-imported it, and now I'm a bit happier with how that looks in terms of stacking. So as you can see, the brackets are floating, but we are going to go back later, maybe in the last video of this series, and add the weld points, the final weld points for the brackets to the column. But other than that, I'm really happy with what I did here. Even though it took about 3.5 hours in total, don't stress the time. If it's a personal project, forget the time. And with that, I will close out this video and see you in the bench one next. Respect. Protect.